Good morning, everyone. Pastor George here with our episode of A New Thing. Today we are talking about the rapture again. So, before I get into it, let's read our passage for today. That's how I like to start. So this is Matthew chapter 24. We're going to start in verse 36. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered into the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one taken and one left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake, and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So, a passage that is often used to talk about the end of the world, especially the rapture. Right, so I want to pick up where we left last week. So you'll remember last week we took a look at Paul's words in 1 Thessalonians, where I think I demonstrated that the word to meet is not in the way that we often understand it. It is an escorting someone down, back into a place. And so the rapture is something where we are taken and not with the world or whatever, is not borne out in that text, right? And so this is another one that is often used to talk about the rapture. But the reason I want to talk about this again, and just why it's always good to be aware of how things form. Like I remember, like some people said we might see a cult form in real time, and that sociologists should be excited about this, because the thing is with the internet, you never get more of an amount of a data pool than you ever would, right? And so, like, if you didn't know, remember I talked last week about this guy named Brother Joshua. He predicted the rapture was going to happen last week. Well, he did what always happens with these types of things, which is the first thing that happens is they change the date. So they say, oh, no, I was wrong. I forgot to account for XYZ. So actually the day is going to be later. Or if it's not that, then what will eventually happen is there'll be the rapture was this date. No, it's this date. And then they may change that a few times. But eventually, after it doesn't occur, what then will happen is someone will say, actually, it has happened, but like a spiritual rapture. So, for instance, like this is what the Jehovah's Witnesses believe. Right, their leader was always predicting Jesus is going to come back. He didn't, and what they did is they just kept changing the date, and eventually they actually said, actually he is, that what's happened in the rapture, or what we believe about it, has already happened, and Jesus is currently reigning now, right? And they have ways of explaining that through the Book of Revelation, through reading bits and pieces of the Book of Revelation, right? I want to be clear, that's not true, right? What they said, right? This is how you cover for false prophecy. So this guy, right, Brother Joshua, he said that the date has changed. The whole point was that it was supposed to happen in the Feast of Trumpets, and that's also he's getting that idea from 1 Corinthians and other places that talk about how there'll be a sound of a trumpet. Right, which is, again, this kind of prophetic imagery used in the Bible to talk about the day of the Lord. Trumpets signal judgment. And so he said it will be during the Feast of the Trumpets, which is Rosh Hashanah. But he said he made a mistake because he was using our calendar. Our calendar, in case you don't know, is called the Gregorian calendar, part of a series of reforms by Pope Gregory in the Middle Ages. And what that did is it shifted our dates. So the easiest way to see this is with like the Christmas thing. So like I know like I'm sure you'll see like on your calendar, or Easter, right? You'll see like, oh, it's Easter, and then like 2 weeks later, it'll say like Orthodox Easter, right? Because the Eastern Orthodox Church uses the old Julian calendar, which basically means that everything in our time for us happens like 2 weeks after. So he said, "Oh, actually, when Jesus came to me in a dream and showed me the vision and said that there's going to be a rapture, right? Which he's either lying or it wasn't Jesus that he saw, right? What does it say, right? The devil is an angel of light, um, and he said actually what he meant was it wasn't that day. It was supposed to be the Julian calendar, right? Because the Julian calendar was the one that was being used at the time of Jesus. Now, I personally believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. I'm pretty sure that when he brings you a message, he can account for calendar differences. I don't think he would say, "Oh, it's going to happen on this day," and then expect you to know the Julian calendar is what he's talking about. And if we're going to get really pedantic about this and talk about what calendar was in use, the Jewish calendar uses a lunar cycle, and Rosh Hashanah was last week, right? And if there was any calendar that he would use, to the detriment of others available, again, like I don't think that this is an actual thing, but it would be the Jewish calendar, right? So anyway, the rapture's been moved back. It's going to be next week. I believe he said the 6th and 7th. And of course, it's not going to happen. If I'm wrong, I'll see you in the air. But yeah, it won't, because the rapture is not biblical. And I say this, I do want to be clear. I know I didn't just sound it. I do bring this with a spirit of humility, but it's just something I've seen happen so many times, and it's something that so many people believe in out of tradition, that that I have to kind of speak strongly against it. So I don't mean to insult anyone when I say that. And so, all that being said, I want to look at another text that's often used for the rapture, and this is from the Olivet discourse. It's the one I read before. It's "No one knows the day and the hour," and this is often used to talk about the end of the world. And I've talked about the Olivet discourse before, how it is a serious point of kind of debate in Christian history how to interpret it. And just like the book of Revelation, there's a spectrum of two sides, which is the preterist side, which means that these things have already happened, and there's the futurist side, which says it's going to happen in the future. Now, if you know anything about my teaching, I've preached on this, I've done videos on this, like I've leaned much, much more strongly to the preterist side than to the futurist side. Like, I believe that in the Olivet discourse, with the context that we're given, with the teachings that Jesus is giving us, that he is talking about the destruction of the temple primarily. Now, I do think that we can also take that and say Jesus is prefiguring the final judgment in these things and what he's saying, in the sense that they're like that this shows us God's justice and how God will meet things out. Okay? And I'm also not saying that I've figured everything out, but just given context and given my reading of church history and other theologians from the early church and things like that, that there's a lot more to this than just saying it's going to happen in the future. And there's some really serious problems, I think, if you just say it's all about the future, like the fact that Jesus will say that it's going to happen in this generation, right? And I know that people have different interpretations of that, but I've never found those particularly persuasive. So so I want to talk about this, right? Because this is one of the things that's talked about, right? One of the images of the rapture is people are taken and their clothes are left on the ground. They're just taken immediately, right? They're both there, and then suddenly one of them is gone, sort of thing. And this is where it's leaned into here. So I want to talk about like what Jesus is saying here and what he means by this. And I think when you read it again in the context that it's talking about, because what I've noticed is a lot of people will take a bunch of different texts, like this text and First Thessalonians and Corinthians, and then just say, oh, they're all talking about the same thing, without paying attention to the context of any of those things. And so Jesus here is talking about concerning that day and hour, right? And he's talking about the fig tree, right? From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all of these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. And what is he talking about? He's talking about the coming of the Son of Man in the tribulation, right? And the abomination of desolation. So I believe that all of that is referring to Jerusalem being destroyed, Jesus bringing justice down upon the covenant breaking Jews, and just as God has done in the past, God will do it again for people that break the covenant, right? I mean, we're in Isaiah right now, in our through the sermons, through the Bible series, sermon series, we're going to be doing Jeremiah. You're going to see it there as well, right? God will bring justice upon those who break the covenant, and this is the language that's used for that sort of thing. And so to hammer home this point, so that's the day and hour that Jesus is talking about. And he says that no one knows. And of course, there's like interesting Trinitarian things here, right? Where it says the Son doesn't know, but if the Son's God, how is he not? And of course, like people will debate about this. I mean, the traditional explanation is in his humiliation, Christ takes on humanity in the sense of not knowing the future and knowing what things will happen. That's one way of doing it. Or it's just, or it could be that he's just acquiescing this to the person of the Father in the sense of this divine kind of foreknowledge or whatever, right? It's not a simple explanation. But that's not what I'm talking about today. My focus is on 37, right? For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man, right? So the days of Noah were what? Well, it was time of wickedness, licentiousness, and then judgment, right? And he describes kind of how people were acting. He says, for in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage until the day when Noah entered into the ark. So everyone is living life as they were, and you'll have to remember, we're going to not look exactly at that. I just want to look at a little bit of it. But in the Noah story, right, it always describes the wickedness of the people, right? And so basically they're just living their lives, not paying attention to what's happening or anything like that, right? And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So the important thing, right, is and it says they were unaware until the flood came and swept them away. So what is being what is doing there? Like who's being swept away, right? Though the people are. And I just want to look really quickly at this word, aren. This is a verb. You'll notice here that this means taken away, like in its most common use, right? So taken, took, taken again, took, picked, away, carried away, lifted away, bared away, right? Like, but you can see the vast majority of the thing is to take, right? And you'll see Jesus says, take my yoke upon you, take up your cross, right? It's to take. And that's a pretty important thing because that's a word that's going to be used later. The poetic way, of course, is to say swept them away because it's a flood. The waters come and they sweep them away. But I think in going for this poetic rendering, this is the ESV, it's not wrong at all. That is a perfectly fine way of translating it in the Greek. But one of the things that we can miss is that it's just, you know, the same, the thing that's going, that is talking about the flood is that it's taking people away, right? And so he says the same will be with the coming of the Son of Man. And then he says, then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, and one left. Now this is a different word for taken. This is paralambano, which is to be taken with or took, right? And this is, again used here, right? He rose and took his wife. Jesus took with him Peter and John. He took the 12 disciples. The governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters. The devil took him to the holy city, right? Like it's taking people away from a place, right? So it is a different word, but I don't think that that's inconsequential. It's getting across the same idea that is going on with Iro there, right? So it's the idea that one will be taken and one will be left. Now, in what Jesus said, right, when he describes the days of Noah, who are the people that are taken away? Think about it. I'll give you 5 seconds. All right, hopefully you got the answer right, right? It's not Noah and his family. It's not the good people that are taken away, it's the evil people that are taken away, right? They're the ones who are swept away in the flood, not Noah and his family, right? So when it says the two men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left, two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. The one taken away is the evil person. And just like a fun thing that I saw is I was looking at the Greek here, and I've never really looked too in depth at some of these verses before. But an interesting thing is like I was wondering because it doesn't say two men or two women. But the kind of interesting thing here, and this is such a nerd thing, I know most people won't care about it, but you can tell that it's talking about men because it uses the word for one in its masculine form, and then for the verse 41, it uses it in its feminine form because it doesn't actually say like grinding, two women grinding or something like that, right? It just says two will be grinding in or at the mill, one taken and one left, right? So it's kind of interesting. In any case, right? This is the idea here when we're talking about the of comparing it with Noah is the reading of it, the most plain text, obvious reading of it, that actually this is going to be people plucked up out of earth, taken to be with God, and those are the good people, and the rest are going to be here and suffer tribulation. That doesn't seem to be the case, right? This seems to be that God is going to come and bring justice, and those who are doing evil will be taken away, right? And that's why Jesus says that we should be aware, because he's telling them, not just us. I mean, in looking at the future and final judgment and return of Christ, this certainly is something that still applies, and we should be aware that we should watch ourselves, right, and be aware of how we're acting in the world. Stay awake, right? But here it's very clear he's telling the people that pay attention to what I'm telling you because these things are going to happen in this generation. Right? So just to remind us, I just want to look quickly at Genesis 7 because this is after Noah has been told to build the ark, right? And so it says, just starting in right here in 11, right, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife with 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, two of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life, and those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God commanded, and the Lord shut him in. Right, so they're protected. And then it talks about the waters, right, covering everything, that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, all swarming creatures, everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out everything that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days, right? Noah and his family and the creatures on the ark are the ones that are left. They are not the ones taken away, right? So this is why we need to know our scripture, and this is why we need to have very good ways of reading things, and why it's important for us when we see people talking about things to be very clear and honest about what the text means, to be humble when we do so, but to present the text as it would have been understood by the people at the time, and not just thinking that everything is about us today, because that's often maybe where our hearts can go in these things. And so I want to end by saying, the saddest part about all of this is the damage that will be done in the wake of it, right? I mean, I know that not everyone here is on all the social media things or whatever, but people were selling their house, their car, they were making statements, they were talking about how they were witnessing to people. And just think about all the testimony that has been hurt and damaged and lives that are ruined by people like this guy. Right? And the thing is that at the end of the day, whatever gets the most press will be what people think of. People will think of Christianity and think that this is what we're about, or that this is like normal, everyday teaching that is common in the church. And even I know, like, it's not. Even in people who do, in churches that do believe in pre-tribulation rapture and all these other types of things, right? This isn't common, but this is like, this is the worry of bad theology, right? Bad theology hurts people because it has all these unintended consequences. This guy was looking for fame, or was puffing himself up, or if we're being extremely generous, was lied to by a demonic spirit, right? And accepted that lie and profited off of it. And he's not at all, at this point in the interview, the pieces of interview clips that I've seen, remorseful about that. In fact, he's doubling down. And he said he's 1,000,000,000% sure that the rapture is going to happen in a few days. And, I don't think it's going to. I'm going to be honest, because I don't really believe that it's a thing, at least in the sense of the way he's describing it, the way it's commonly believed to be a thing. In some part of me, I hopes I'm wrong about that. I desire to see the Lord. I desire for this testimony to be proved true, and people to come to Christ. But given the fact that God's test for a prophet is a one-strike rule, and this guy has used his one strike, I have a feeling, given the weight of Scripture and given his false prophecies, that this will probably not be true. But I guess we'll see in a few days. So, isn't that exciting? In any case, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you on Sunday for worship. Peace out.